Becky.
And I'm Lindsay, and today we're here to talk about the other 10%, which sounds a little bit kind of, what on earth are you guys on about? To be fair, when we reminded ourselves about this, we wrote this down as a vlog. Where were we going with it as well? We actually had that conversation. But the principle behind it is 90% of the time, we're herd animals. We like to do the same thing. We love a good routine. Like who got thrown out by bank holiday the other day? Well, the other week now. I hated it. A 4-day week blows my brain and feels like the longest week in the world. Yet you should be excited because you've only got 4 days to go and do stuff and you get a long weekend. No, absolutely messes with everything. And everyone you speak to is a little bit grumpy. The clocks change by an hour, not 6 hours, not 7 hours, just 1 hour. And it messes up with us for a good week or so, doesn't it? Shifting that pattern. So we're herd animals. We like to be in groups, we like to follow. So in terms of business and in terms of if you're trying to sell a product, or for us, if we are teaching a group of students, how do we engage and how do we convert and connect with that extra 10%?
Yeah, and it goes further than that as well. It's about change.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do any culture change as well.
Yeah, how do you, 90% will follow you, but it won't work unless you get the 10% on board.
Yeah, no, the 90% won't follow you because they can't deal with change.
Oh yeah, in a change situation.
In a change situation, it's the other way around.
It's the other way around, it's a flip.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I've caught up. I was going with the class. You want that the minority to get on board.
So go on. You start off with theirs, and then I'll flip it the other way.
Perfect. So in a class situation, you can see how well we're processing today. We're on a 90%, definitely following what we're on. But we've got in a class situation most of the time, most students, and I think a lot of teachers often go to the negative place of these won't do it, they won't do it. But actually, if you step back and look at it, the big picture is 90% of students, most of the time, will do as they're told, get on board, whatever. There'll be that 10% that's hard to reach, and there's that 10% which then can have a really, really quick negative knock-on effect on the 90%, and suddenly you've only got 80% on board, 75% on board, 70% on board, and that 10% is sucking in. So actually, how do you get that 10% on quickly? For me, 100% of the time it comes down to connection and knowing what makes those 10% tick, and not just seeing them as a problem that you've got to convert and get on. It's actually going, I need to see what their strengths are, identifying what they're good at, giving them a role, giving them something positive, giving them something to build on, making them feel valued, making them feel heard, making them feel like their opinion matters, making them feel that yes, they're having a bad day and that's all right and it's okay today, but seeing their place and their value within the group of 100%. And then once you do that, very quickly, you can start shifting the dynamics in the team setting.
And actually, I'm going to carry that on, but to say how it works differently within an organisational setting. So I've recently done some work with a national charity with presentations, helping them build up for an AGM where they've got some nasty messages to send out that aren't going to go down very well. So we've looked at facilitating as a team rather than it being just one person. We've looked at the kind of messaging, how to sell it, all this kind of thing. But the one thing that we were talking about there is, and we would get the information we were getting across was 90% of that room will be behind you with your message. There will be 10% that's not. And they will try and heckle, and they will try and call you out, and they will try to make life awkward for you. So whereas in a classroom setting, you will sit down with that 10% to nurture them and to get them so they aren't disruptive. When you're in an organisational setting like this and you're actually at a presentation, you actually have to try and be aware of what those objectives are going to be.
Objections.
The objections
are going to be before
you start, so you can quash them before they come out.
And facilitating, you almost want to dispel it so it doesn't start to ripple out.
So that if they do, you go, thank you for that, and you move on. You basically ignore them. You accept them, you let them be heard.
Let them have a voice, accept it, don't start a two-way argument about it. Don't start blowing it up, because all of a sudden in that setting you'll get somebody else going, oh, well actually, they've got a point. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. oh, well, they're my friend as well, so I'm going to stick up for them. And then you get this kind of ripple effect going on, and it's so difficult to manage.
But it's a different way of processing and approaching in the class. The same kind of concept.
So it's totally the same concept, but it's to do with age, it's to do with psychology, it's to do with the room, it's to do with the setup.
And it's to do with what you're doing. In a classroom environment, they're learning.
Yep.
In a presentation, they're not necessarily learning.
They're being given information.
Which is a different thing.
If you're in a business setup where they're learning something and you're teaching new skills, then that's completely different. You have to design your program, not for the 90, you need to design it for the 10%, because everybody else will get on board and everybody else will get stuff in it. That's not saying you ignore the needs of the 90% over here, but in designing it for the 10%, some of those students or adults or people that you're going to need to work hard to get the information to, out of no fault of their own, but you as the facilitator are going to really have to stretch your knowledge to be able to dig deep and pull it out and get them on board. By doing that, you'll then provide opportunities of growth, and you'll provide scaffolding, you'll provide extension, you'll provide opportunities for other people to embed knowledge, and everybody will feel like they're growing together, but in this kind of bubbling ripple effect. So everyone's going in the right direction. It should not be a linear line of growth. It should be like so all the people are like rippling and growing and going together and coming around and back.
Wavy lines.
Wavy lines, yeah. I love the idea of the sea. So like when you stand on a beach and you watch the sea come in, and if the tide's coming in, it comes in a little bit and it goes back, takes some sand with it, and then it comes in and it goes back, takes some sand with it. Eventually, it all comes in and it all reaches at the same time, and everything comes back again. But yeah, it's allowing that process for that to happen rather than going, right, we've got to get from here to here, and it's like, no, it'll just happen over time.
Yeah, but that is different to giving out information.
Hugely.
And that's another side. That is looking at a sales approach almost.
Yeah.
It's looking at making sure any objections are dealt with before the objections become objections. Mm-hmm. So you have everything answered. So those questions that you know are going to come, and sometimes you don't know, so you need to research beforehand. Mm-hmm. You can address those before they come from the floor, at which point you start getting problems.
Yeah.
So those are two kind of group sessions that you can look at, and then you've got culture change, which is a whole other ball game.
Yeah, but this 90-10% thing, if you don't consider it in your plans when you're taking on a new role, or you're in a new organisation, or you've met a new team, or you're going in to set something up in a new community setting, if you're not considering this within changing that culture or to have the impact, it's not going to work, because you're just going to keep coming up against obstacles all the time. So how do you deal with it for culture change then? Okay.
So with culture change, you can never go in and say, we are going to do this. Mm-hmm. You go in and do that, you're not going to get them on board.
Nope.
So you might get 10% on. That's about it. Mm-hmm. If you go in and create a dialogue and create workshops and create engagement, you only need to find 10% of your workforce. You do not choose that 10%. You let that 10% come to you. You put the courses out there and you spend time saying that they get this.
And you will hear the little ripples in the staff room of going, look, I know it's difficult, guys, but look at the big picture. This is going to really help us in this. And then somebody will be going, wait, and those conversations, those 10% will ripple the information and reach, and then that's how you create that culture change. So how do you get those 10% to come to you? Well, that's about how you deliver the information, and the types of workshops and the types of settings, the times of day that you engage with them.
But it's also to do with your keeping your open mind. So in other talks, we've talked about bias. Now, this is where you have to keep your bias and be aware of it so much more, because the types of people that are going to help you affect that change aren't going to be the people you think of.
100%. And you will be surprised every single time.
Oh, yes.
Every single time. The people that you think won't be on board with something, suddenly will be like, this is great. And it will come from nowhere.
But it's not just that, it's the people that have the influence within your organisation that you do not realise have the influence in your organisation. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be able to sell it. You can't tell them the how and the what.
No.
You have to pull them on with the why.
Yeah.
Simon Sinek's the master of this.
Yeah, the master of why.
But then if you talk to anyone else we were at a conference recently, and again, they were talking about this whole process, and it was a 3-step process type thing. But the synergies between the how, the what and the why very much worked within this sales side as well. So it's not, it is selling.
It is selling.
If you're doing culture change, you've got to sell something.
And this is where you're selling the next stages to your workforce. And if you are not confident in sales or sales speak or engaging with people, it's something you've got to upskill yourself on before you go into it, because
But it's not necessarily sales speak.
No, but you know the sales process of the.
But it's not about selling the what and the how.
It's all to do with the why.
What is the belief? What is the ethos? What is it you're trying to do? What is the identity? You sell that, the rest will go. But it's only 10% that you need to sell that to. If it's the right 10%, they will move.
Yep.
But having said that, as a bell curve.
Oh, massive. There's always bell curves everywhere.
So you'll have these 10% people, you'll have 10% who will always be on board.
Yep.
You'll have 10% of people who will never ever be on board.
Yep.
And then within the rest of it, there will be 10% of people who will affect the change of everyone else. I think that's where I was going with it.
I love it. I've got a proper picture in my head now. I can see it. I've even colour coded it and everything. It's like a proper little animation. So I think when you're thinking about culture change, if you're thinking about starting something new, if you're thinking about launching a new topic with your students, if you're redesigning a new product within your business, if you are venturing out into a new community and you're going to meet new people, just remember this process of 10%.
Yeah.
The other 10%, and think about it, and think about some of these things that we've gone on, because it will really help you break it down and look at it objectively to then actually think about, well, what's the best way to go about doing this change and implementing this change and supporting the change that you're wanting to do. So have a go. Let us know how it goes, and we'll see you next time. Take care.